Hello, welcome to this presentation of the role of safety in the nervous system when healing from chronic pain and chronic illness. This is a recording of a presentation that was done on February 21st, 2026. And I decided to just record it separately so that it could be available for folks who are interested in learning more about how important safety in the nervous system is when you are in the process of healing from chronic pain and chronic illness. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. The role of nervous system safety in healing from chronic pain and illness. My name is Jody Silverman, and I am a holistic psychotherapist and nervous system practitioner. A little bit about me. For over 30 years, I've worked with individuals, couples, and fellow clinicians supporting nervous system healing from trauma, chronic pain, illness, relational wounds, and the impact of living in survival mode for too long. Over the course of my career, we have really evolved in terms of what we know about how the whole body and all of the systems within our body actually work together, including the nervous system, the immune system, the endocrine system, and the impact of those systems working together and or against each other on our physical and emotional wellness. The way in which my work is organized, I actually have two businesses. Journey with Kindred Souls is my business in which I provide coaching, courses, sound-based regulation, heart center practices, and nervous system safety outside of therapy. Therapy Healing is my holistic psychotherapy practice. This is kind of the umbrella under which everything else falls. It is within this practice that I provide nervous system informed therapy for chronic pain and illness, relational trauma, and complex patterns. And then I also have a podcast called the Spiritually Curious Therapist Podcast, where I interview mostly other practitioners around the intersection of nervous system science, healing, and consciousness. And I definitely recommend checking it out if you have any kind of interest in how holistic practices can be woven into mental health, healing, and wellness. But all of these ways in which I approach the work are grounded in the same principle, which is this idea that when nervous system safety is restored, our access to our internal wisdom and the ability for our bodies to heal returns. So let's just pause here a moment. Now we're going to be doing this a couple times throughout the presentation, and you don't have to change anything. I just would like for you to notice. Maybe just taking in the room around you, noticing the weight of your body on your chair, noticing any familiar sounds, and maybe just orienting, looking to the left and the right, and just seeing what arrives. The nervous system is always asking one question: am I safe? Everything else follows from that answer. How does the nervous system determine whether you're safe or not? Well, there is this process called neuroception. This is a term that was coined by Dr. Stephen Porges, and it is the way in which our nervous system automatically detects cues of safety and or danger outside of our conscious awareness. Our nervous system is constantly scanning our environment, and taking in information to determine whether we are safe or not. And now there's this other process that occurs, which is called interoception. And this is how we sense what's happening inside of our body. These are the sensations that we are aware of inside our body. For example, how do we know we have to go to the bathroom? How do we know that we're hungry? How do we know if we're injured? How do we know if we're cold? How do we know if we're hot? Interoception is the way in which our nervous system notices these sensations. We have this ways of taking in information, and that information then gets passed to our brain, and our brain makes meaning out of it and then sends signals via our vagus nerve back to our body to move us into the appropriate nervous system state for whatever might be happening in our environment. How our nervous system responds to these different cues of safety and threat. As I said, the information gets passed to our brain makes meaning out of it, and then our brain sends the information back down through our vagus nerve to all of our systems, our endocrine system, our immune system, to our organs, to prepare and shift into the state that it feels is appropriate for whether there is threat or safety coming into our environment. And if the brain decides that the cues around us are more safe than they are threatening, for the most part, we might stay in this state that's all the way to the left of safety and connection. So I call this the resonant state. It's resonant, alive, and I also like to use archetypes. So for this state, I call this the weaver. When we're in this state, we feel content, we feel curious, we feel connected. It is the state of, overall just ease. The next state is the sympathetic state, which you all have probably heard of. This is the fight flight state. So let's say our nervous system detects some kind of threat and our brain is like, oh gosh, we have to either fight or run from this threat. That's when it sends that information to the rest of our body. It pumps blood to our extremities to get ready to either fight or to run. It slows down digestion. Our eyes tend to get like blinders so that we're super focused. Our hearing changes so that we can listen for different threats in our environment if they get louder. So we're really kind of honed in. If you've ever been in that sympathetic state and you kind of slow it down and really pay attention to how it feels, you know what I'm talking about, right? Like there's tension in your body and you are like ready to go. Now, if for some reason the brain decides, you know what, we cannot fight this threat and we cannot run away from it, we go into, and I'm going to skip the third one and go to the fourth one, and I'll tell you why in a moment. We go into shutdown or conservation mode. This is what we call the collapse state. I call it the winter keeper. This is where it is like, this is basically playing dead, right? Covers over the head, can't get out of bed. It feels like you're moving through molasses. And this is like a true trauma response. This occurs when our brain says, you know what, like we just can't win. And so we're going to shut down and conserve as much energy as we possibly can to ensure that we have what we need just in case there's an opportunity for us to get away from this threat. It also activates a hormone that creates like the feel-good feeling because it's actually preparing us for death, right? And pain. So we have like this overall sense of just like fatigue and just wanting to hide from the world. Those are like the three main states. And then we have mixed states. One of the most well-known mixed states is this one that's in the middle, which is the please and appease. And most of you have heard of this. This is like the freeze fawn. I call it the whisperer. This is a combination of both sympathetic energy and collapse energy where you're not totally collapsed, but you're also not fighting or fleeing. So we tend to be in this state where we are freezing or fawning. If you think about like a deer that freezes in headlights, right? they're frozen, but they're not quite collapsed. There's actually a lot of energy in their system underneath that freeze, right? You can see it, like they're super tense. And given the opportunity, when they can, they take off. A lot of people put freeze in the category of this like shutdown and collapse, and it's not exactly the same thing. Now, I want to be really clear about this because these different states can be much more subtle than the way in which I am describing them. We operate in functional freeze a lot of the time. We can be in a sympathetic state without really totally realizing it, thinking that we might be in that safe, connected state, but we're also like we're over functioning. We are trying to check everything off of our list. All of those things have like sympathetic energy. None of these states are bad. They are all necessary. The goal is not to only be in that safe and connected state, because I want to make this really clear. That is not what a regulated nervous system means. A regulated nervous system is one that can move through these states as needed and then come back to baseline, right? So we need that sympathetic energy. That's what helps us get out of bed in the morning. It's what helps us get our bills paid. We need it in order to play sports, to work out, to play games. We don't want to not be in that state, but we want to be able to have a foothold in that safe and connected state as well, so that we don't get completely swallowed up and stuck. The problem occurs when we get stuck in these protected states. Protection and mobilization, please and appease, shutdown and conservation. When we get stuck in a loop in those states, which many of us are, that's where the problems start to happen, because our nervous system just keeps protecting, 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 and it starts to see everything as a threat. Another really important thing about these states is that the story we make up about ourselves and the world around us is dependent on the state that we are in. I often use the example of, like, let's say you're driving to work and you're in and someone cuts you off, and you're in a safe and connected kind of resonant alive state. You're listening to good music, you got a good night's sleep, you're feeling really good about the day, and you're like, oh, they're probably in a hurry, just go, 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 I'm good. And you go right back to like listening to your music and jamming, right? That's a safe and connected state. But let's just say that now you're in a sympathetic fight flight state. Let's say you didn't get a good night's sleep, there was a lot of chaos in your house in the morning, you're late to work, you're activated and you're motivated and you got to get there, and someone cuts you off. Now, what are you doing? You're yelling, you're screaming, you're probably cursing the person out, right? The story you're making up about the world and yourself is quite different than when you're in that safe and connected state. You're like, what a jerk, opposed to like, oh, they probably really need to get in. It's a much different way of looking at the situation. Now, let's say you're in like that shutdown conservation state, right? Like, again, like maybe you didn't get enough good sleep. You've got so much to do. It's like overwhelming. Oh my God, I gotta go to work today. I don't want to go to work today. I just want to stay in bed. And you're driving, and the person cuts you off. You may not even notice it until you're like, slamming on your brakes. You're like, oh, of course this person's cutting me off. Like this always happens to me. Just one more thing. You notice the difference in energy, right? And it's all state dependent. So that's important information as you kind of take all of this in, because it helps you to know what state you're in. The story you make up about yourself and the world around you can give you information about what state your nervous system is in. Okay. Okay. In a regulated system, as we talked about, our nervous system takes in the information through neuroception and interoception. The vagus nerve sends the signal to the brain. The brain assesses and responds. The body mobilizes or protects. The threat passes, and the system then stands down, and we return to that safe and connected state. That's the way it's supposed to work. Beautiful, right? In a locked system, that's what I call it, the nervous system sends the signal to the brain. The brain predicts danger, even if there is none. Pain is generated as protection because pain is a signal. The vagus nerve stays on high alert. Our whole system stays on high alert. And then fear and attention to this symptom reinforces that loop. And so the system never stands down, and we stay stuck in this loop as a result of a misinterpretation of what is happening either inside of us or outside of us. This can happen also in a locked system, even if, let's just say there is a real threat. So instead of the brain predicting danger, even if there isn't one, let's say the brain predicts danger and there is danger. We then get mobilized into that protected state, but the vagus nerve still doesn't stand down once the threat passes because the brain believes that there is still a threat as a result of the fear and attention that we are giving it. So the loop gets reinforced. The threat is actually gone, but because there's still fear in our system, the brain believes that there is still danger. The nervous system that's locked into this protection loop, the body stays on alert. The symptoms start to become patterns, and the pain signals in particular stay amplified. So it's like turning the volume dial up, and the brain starts to interpret neutral stimuli as dangerous. So once it's stuck in this loop, it's in this protected state, and the body can't heal and protect at the same time. We just can't do both. So when the nervous system doesn't stand down, that we get muscle tension and pain signaling. It reduces our access to repair and digestion. All the stress chemistry and inflammation starts to happen because all of our systems, our immune system and our endocrine system is getting the message that there is danger and it needs to get to work, get to work, get to work. And we also, and I want to make sure that this is part of this conversation as well, experience symptoms of anxiety and depression. Okay, so what does a locked system needs, right? This is the magic pill, so to speak, safety. Safety is a word that's been thrown around a lot lately, especially as we are talking more and more about nervous system regulation and how important that is. And so I'm really hopeful that this presentation will help give you an idea of what we mean when we talk about safety in the nervous system, because it's not necessarily what we think it is. So safety in our system, when our system feels safe, right, when we have access to that ventrovagal, safe connected Weaver resonant state, we're able to conserve energy without having to drop all the way into collapse. We are able to learn and grow and heal. Our body doesn't change because we force it to. It changes when the conditions allow it. So this is really important because we can try to force our body to heal or change or grow, and that's only going to reinforce danger within our system. Safety is what helps our nervous system stand down so that we can experience these things in our lives. So we're not talking about relaxation. We're not talking about positive thinking or calming down or forcing ourselves to do anything like forcing meditation or yoga or, long walks in nature. While all of those things are super helpful and should be part of an overall plan, the important pieces for safety are the ways in which we approach things. It's all about context and conditions. So safety is having choice. Do I want to do this or do I want to do that? Get rid of the shoulds, like stop shoulding on yourself. Anytime you start saying, I should, you're automatically telling your system that there is some kind of threat happening. Safety is having context. Get as much information as you need in order to feel like you know what is going on in your environment so that your system can stand down and relax. So that's one of the things we're going to talk about is orienting, which you already did when we paused and we noticed. That's one really simple thing you can start to do right now, which is every time you walk into a room, look around mindfully, take in the information so that your nervous system can really take the time to assess, am I in danger right now? Safety is having predictability, being believed, seen, and heard. Safety is appropriate pacing. We're not trying to force anything on anybody or push. Safety is definitely connection, co-regulation, and that means being with other nervous systems that are regulated and having flexibility. This is not an exhaustive list, but these are some of the things that are important in order for safety to occur. It is the condition that allows our nervous system to stand down. Okay, so we're just going to pause here again. I just gave you a lot of information. And what I'd like to ask you to do now is just notice something that feels okay to your senses. So maybe it's something that you see, a color or a shape or a combination of things. Maybe it's something that you smell or a sound or maybe a texture. Whatever it is, just let your nervous system take it in and really notice how that feels. Okay, so just coming back here, what causes a nervous system to lock? Every nervous system is uniquely wired. That's first and foremost, that everyone's nervous system is different. And a lot of things contribute to that. Genetics, our ancestors have a lot to do with how our nervous systems are wired. And we know this through various studies of grandchildren of Holocaust survivors, descendants of the potato famine. There's many studies that have been done that look at how epigenetics play a role in people's nervous system and experience of the world based on their ancestors' experiences. Whether we're born into the world with a sensitive system, some systems are just designed to detect threat earlier and more intensely than others. Life experiences then, of course, either support or don't support that. So things like trauma, illness, chronic stress, attachment injuries, early childhood experiences, big T traumas, but also small T traumas, repeated, like almost but not quite safe enough experiences, they create vigilance in our system. And sometimes it's something subtle. If you have a combination of someone born into the world with a sensitive system and grew up in an environment that didn't quite support that, that's enough to create a system that is very sensitive to threats. Timing also matters. So early experiences or stress during vulnerable periods in someone's lives tend to have more of an impact. The nervous system learns survival patterns when it's still forming. So again, these are patterns of survival that developed in order to keep us safe. Remember, our nervous system's number one job is to keep us alive. And that is it. And it will do anything it can in order to ensure that happens, even if it's not necessarily in our best emotional, social interest. Our systems adapt. These aren't failures. The things that look like overreaction or supersensitivity or pain or tension or shutdown or whatever it might be, they developed for a reason. And I think that's really important to just consider that your system, there's not something wrong with it. It's not failing. It's protecting you. And it developed for a reason. And it worked for a while. So some systems, of course, had more buffering, safety support, and predictability. Others had to stay alert longer with fewer chances to reset. So context and capacity are important. Oftentimes, these sensitive systems are intuitive, empathetic, resilient folks. The same wiring that detects danger quickly also detects meaning, connection, and healing. It's like two sides of the same coin. We don't want to minimize the gifts that come from having a sensitive system because they're super important. You need them, we need them, the world needs them. And we also want to care for the parts of the system that are overreacting in such a way that they are causing suffering. So nervous systems lock because they learned that staying alert was safer, not because the individual is broken or weak. It's really important. Again, just to reiterate, these symptoms are not failures, they're strategies. Pain, gut disruption, fatigue, inflammation, anxiety, depressed mood, these are all ways in which the body and the nervous system is protecting us. They are signals, they are meant to give us information. And how does the nervous system learn how to do this? Experience over and over and over again. So repeated threats strengthen these protective responses. Neurons that fire together, wire together. They become entrained in our system. And this is called neuroplasticity. The nervous system also, this is really important, likes familiarity. So it will use patterns that it already knows as a way of giving you information. So perhaps a place that's been injured before or maladaptive behavioral patterns that you've used in the past. It'll just like dump you right back into that loop. The really interesting thing comes from cultural norms. So, a symptom that someone grew up with, seeing in a parent or a family member, a lot of times we'll see people who will, have, let's say, back pain, say, yeah, my mom, she had a really bad back too. So, like, it makes sense that I would have one, or a body or system that's already under stress. Sometimes it's a place that the brain associates with danger, like you just have these experiences. Every time I go to the supermarket, I tense. It's the lights, it's the noise, it's the people, I don't know, but I get tense and I usually come home from the supermarket with like tension and pain in my lower back. What is that about? Well, that's my brain associating supermarket overwhelm, tension. Oh, let me warn you. Let me warn you. This is what happens when you go here, right? Don't go, don't go, don't go. These are the ways in which our nervous system communicates with us through these symptoms. Here's a really interesting study. The whiplash epidemic. In a study conducted in Lithuania, almost half the subjects had pain immediately following a car accident. 10% had neck pain, 19 had a headache, 90% had a headache, 18% had neck pain and headache. After 1 year, the percentage of subjects reporting pain dropped to the same level as Lithuanians who had never been in an accident. Lithuania does not have a chronic whiplash epidemic. In the United States, however, 25 to 40% still have symptoms a year later. Why? Any guesses? Neuroplastic symptoms. The brain's ability to predict and create symptoms in the body even when there is no structural reason for it. So the whiplash epidemic, in many Western countries, the US in particular, whiplash became widely known as a potentially chronic condition. So it became a thing. Expectations of long-term pain increased. Somewhere in our brain and our memory is this idea that, whiplash lasts for a really long time. And the brain learns to interpret these post-injury sensations as an ongoing threat. So here's the other thing that's really interesting that we learned when it comes to like neuroplastic pain and symptoms is that People who tend to have this, what they're experiencing are sensations, right? So just like if you all are sitting in your chairs right now and you're watching this, just take a moment and like just tune into, let's say your back for a moment. And just notice any sensations in your back. Like right now, as if I really tune in, there's a little bit of tightness on my left, no, that's my right lower back, and also like my upper back. I did a arms and shoulders workout today, so like there's some tightness there. But what happens with people whose brains and nervous system are stuck in these loops is that those sensations, the volume, remember we talked about this earlier, the volume is turned all the way up to a 10. So it's almost like if you're wearing hearing aids and I'm talking to you at a 2, but you have that volume turned up at a 10, I'm going to sound really loud. And so people who experience these types of symptoms, their brain has the experience of the sensation that's really a 2 turned all the way up to a 10. So the pain is real, the discomfort is real, the symptoms are really real. It's not that they're not real. It's just that there's not a structural reason for it, or as much of a structural reason for it to be as high or as intense as it is. So the nervous system is staying in this protection mode and it's like screaming at you. And the pain persists even after there's healing. So this is where we go back to like getting stuck in that loop. And then you feel that little twinge and you're like, oh man, it's back, it's there, it's bad today. And then that fear just reinforces to your nervous system that there continues to be a threat. So another one, this one blew my mind. So the German car crash study. Researchers in Germany wanted to determine whether chronic whiplash results from a physical injury or not. So this is like on the heels of this Lithuania study. 51 participants experienced a simulated car crash. 3 days later, 20% of them reported neck pain attributed to the collision, and 1 month later, 10% of them still suffered from symptoms. There was no actual crash, like no impact, no reason for anyone to have experienced any kind of injury. There was no rear end impact, no sudden acceleration, no mechanical injury force applied to the neck, no change in speed. They were placed in a stationary vehicle or sled and told they were part of a crash experiment. That's it. And what they did manipulate is they had a car seat, headrest, and seatbelts, lab staff in crash test rolls, and warnings about possible neck symptoms. Oh, you might experience some, tension in your neck. There's going to be like this big impact, and you might feel that in your neck and your back. That's it. And yet people experienced pain not only right afterwards, but 30 days later as a result. So, neuroplastic symptoms, where and how do they show up? Well, back and neck pain, but they can also be GI issues, pelvic pain, whiplash, as we've talked about. Long COVID has some neuroplastic symptomology, depression, anxiety, fatigue. There's a whole list of neuroplastic symptoms. And again, there's also like mixed symptoms where there is some structural issue as well as an increase in the amount of pain or discomfort someone might be feeling. But for the most part, a lot of the discomfort and suffering can be a result of the lack of safety in your nervous system. And this loop that we get stuck in, where the brain just keeps predicting threat and then keeps us in that protective mode and uses these symptoms, whether it's pain or GI issues or fatigue, as a way of trying to keep you safe. I can't say that enough times. What if the symptoms are not like actually pain, right? We find things like mold exposure markers, Lyme antibodies, gut microbiome imbalances, all of these different inflammatory markers. There's a lot of things that when we start testing and looking that we can find in our bodies and connect to some of the symptoms we might be experiencing. The important thing to remember is that these findings are common in people with and without symptoms. So it's not that there isn't something going on in your body. There is always something going on in our bodies because we're human and we're bodies and we're living organisms and our bodies are constantly moving through things and trying to heal and change and grow and survive. This is not meant to minimize any of this. The question to ask yourself as you're working to heal from these things is how much is the lack of safety in your nervous system keeping you stuck in this cycle and therefore not able to heal from these things and continuing to experience discomfort, symptoms, and suffering, even though the actual structural threat is not there anymore. The brain is a meaning-making organ. It predicts outcomes, it fills in the gaps. Our brains love to do this. And thank goodness. I mean, that's what keeps us on top of the food chain, right? Once a cause is identified, our nervous system will organize around it, and then the symptoms gain coherence and persistence. So again, I want to be really clear. I am not talking about symptoms being imagined. I'm talking about symptoms being produced by the brain as a way of trying to maintain safety and not as the result of a structural issue. Nicole Sachs will say, and she's somebody that's really big in the mind-body field, the pain is not all in your head, and the solution is not all in your body. Oftentimes, labels can really lock symptoms in because it creates like an increase in monitoring of the body, this reduced sense of safety, and then the nervous system remains on duty. So the ongoing threat loop is like, let's say you wake up in the morning and you're like super tired. You're like, oh my gosh, my Lyme is flaring. And as soon as you start getting into that loop, the nervous system's like, oh my gosh, we can't go back there again. You got to rest. You got to rest. And so it increases this sense of fatigue because it's trying to keep you safe, right? I want you to collapse and be in this state of conserving energy. And so you feel really tired and like you don't want to face the world. And now you're back in this Lyme relapse. And again, that's not to say that there's not something happening in your body. It's just a matter of how we approach it that can make all the difference in the world. If we approach it with fear, it's just reinforcing the need for us to stay in these protected loops versus bringing safety in as a way of helping the body to do whatever it might need to do in that moment. But these labels can unwittingly reinforce the fear pain cycle. I see this happen a lot with the trackers too. Trackers are great. I mean, I've got, my watch tells me about my HRV. A lot of people use like the Aura Ring and they're really great. But if you're using these tools in a way that's creating more fear in you, like, oh my God, I'm out of two, I have to rest, I can't go anywhere, I can't do anything. All that's doing is keeping you in this loop. And what I'd like to invite you to do is not to like throw the baby out with the bathwater, but the goal is really to get more in touch with your body and use your own relationship to your body, your interoception and your neuroception, like start to trust those a little bit more as a way of determining what you need in that moment. Because then you're bringing in self-compassion, you're bringing in curiosity, you're bringing in choice, you're bringing in context, you're bringing safety, opposed to depending on something outside of yourself that is giving you information that has the potential to create more fear in your system. In order to move into this space of bringing safety in as a way of helping to heal from chronic pain and chronic illness, we don't have to be 100% certain, but we do have to be open to the idea that these symptoms may be a result of our brain and our nervous system being stuck in this protective mode. And as a result, we can develop a working hypothesis and being in that open state, bringing safety into the system and see what happens. The nervous system is capable of learning these symptoms. It is also capable of unlearning them. So wouldn't it be cool if we could do that? So we start to gather some evidence. There's 12 key criteria to think about, but this is not or I should say, and this is not a completely exhaustive list, and you don't need to have all 12 to start to work with it. But just some things to consider as you're thinking about symptoms. Did they originate during a stressful time? Did they originate without an injury or an illness or an incident? Do you have multiple symptoms? Do they spread? Do they move? Are they often triggered by stress? Do they have nothing to do with the body? For example, it's usually a certain time of day, or the weather, or a certain place, or being around certain people. Are they symmetrical? Meaning, like, do they happen on both sides of your body? If it's pain in particular, does it have delayed onset? Meaning you go out for a bike ride and then 3 days later you start to feel pain and you attribute it to that bike ride that was 3 days ago. If it was really a result of that bike ride, you would have felt it during the bike ride, right? And then some other things to consider, as we talked about in terms of nervous system, is do you have a history of adversity, especially in childhood? There are certain personality traits that really contribute to neuroplastic pain, mostly things like perfectionism, overachieving, overfunctioning, worrying, needing to have a lot of control over things. And I think probably one of the most important ones is lack of a physical diagnosis. So, like, have you been to the doctors and they're like, look, we really can't find anything wrong? Or sometimes people will go to doctors and the answer is like, "Ah, we've done all we can for you." Those two things tend to be really big flags of, okay, this might be sustaining because my brain is stuck in this loop. What are some barriers to these beliefs? Well, one is our biology. We are wired to believe that physical pain, physical symptoms means that there's something physically wrong with our body. I mean, when I learned that pain is actually in our brain and not in our body, I was like, wait, what? So like when you stub your toe, the sensation of pain is not actually happening in your toe, it's happening in your brain. And I guess I never really thought about it, but that's how people can have like phantom limb pain. So people who have had amputations still feel pain and sensations in the limb that's been amputated because the pain isn't actually happening in that part of your body. It's coming from your brain. A conditioned response protects us from repeating dangerous experiences. You put your hand on a hot stove and you get burned, you're not going to do it again. And so, again, our brain and our nervous system puts that into play no matter what. If you got hurt while you were walking in the woods, the next time you walk in the woods, you might start to feel pain in that same area that you got hurt, even though there's nothing actually wrong. If you fell and slipped on a rock and cut your shin up really bad, you might be like, "Ooh, why does my shin hurt?" That was a year ago. Well, because your brain, your nervous system remembers. And of course, a medical diagnosis. Oftentimes, people find structural problems if they're looking for them. So this was kind of blew me away too. A lot of people will talk about back pain. What the research shows that this generation is common in pain-free people. 37% of asymptomatic 20-year-olds and 90% of asymptomatic adults over 60 have disc degeneration. 30 to 50% of pain-free adults show disc bulges on an MRI. Herniations can be present without any back pain. Structural findings frequently reflect normal aging, not injury. Dr. Schuberman, who's really big in the neuroplastic pain field, he says that disc degeneration is like gray hair. Everybody has it. And that pain correlates more strongly with the perception of threat, fear, and sensitization. And there have been a lot of studies to support this. Again, just reiterating the meaning that we make about symptoms shapes our experience of those symptoms. So we have a sensation, and that information gets sent to our brain, and our brain interprets that through fear, anger, and despair, like, oh my gosh, like, oh, my back's starting to hurt again. And so it's like danger, danger, danger. And then the fear, anger, and despair gets even bigger. And then the volume gets turned up on it, right? And then it goes back and around and around and around. It just gets reinforced. Just some differences. I thought this was really fascinating in the brain with acute pain, which is structural pain, meaning you get hurt or you get a virus, something's not quite right in your body versus chronic pain. So here's the interesting thing. In the brain, when we experience acute pain or symptoms, there's activation in our sensory regions. And our brain accurately encodes the location and the intensity, and there's a brief activation of threat detection. Minimal emotional processing, and the pain circuit's quiet once the danger resolves. In chronic pain, what happens in the brain is that activity in those sensory regions goes down, and there's increased activation in the emotional and threat related area. So the amygdala gets lit up, which is the fear and threat detection. The anterior cingulate cortex gets lit up, which is suffering, like distress, vigilance. And the insula, which is the interoceptive monitoring bodily alarm. So remember, we talked about interoception. So now you're hyper focused on that sensation. The prefrontal cortex, which is the part of our brain where we make meaning and we have rational thought, the regulation in there goes down, and then the pain becomes linked to emotions, memory, and meaning. It's really fascinating to see the difference between those two things. So, acute pain, yes, like we experience pain when we get sick, when we hurt ourselves. Pain is a protective response. It keeps us from experiencing more threat. If we're running and we twist our ankle, it hurts because if we continue running on it, we're going to cause more injury, right? But once that heals and we're like 6 weeks out and the actual injury is all healed, but we still have pain in our ankle, now it's in a whole different category. So there are some common patterns that keep us locked in that protected state. We approach healing with intensity or perfectionism. We have to do it right. Push harder, try fixing yourself, sending danger signals. Too many interventions at once. I see this a lot. Like, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this. And what that does, it actually overloads your system and can increase vigilance because now your nervous system is like everything becomes a threat. Symptom chasing, constantly monitoring, fixing, eliminating symptoms keeps your attention locked on all of this. And we talked about this earlier too, like this idea of forcing relaxation or positivity, like really trying to override the nervous system instead of listening to it, increases the resistance in your system and ignoring safety cues in the body. So pushing through exhaustion, pain, or shutdown reinforces those survival patterns. So there is this sweet spot between really staying with these symptoms in a way that's like curious and compassionate, listening to the symptoms, really like bringing them in as part of an overall communication with your body versus facing them with fear and pressure and force and trying to push through them. It's a different way of being versus a different way of doing. So again, that was a lot of information. So I'm going to come back around to what now, helping your nervous system feel safe. So these are some important things to remember. Your nervous system responds to signals, not logic. We cannot talk to our nervous system. We can't talk it out of a protection mode. We have to create the conditions in which it feels comfortable standing down. These signals arrive through our senses, the rhythm of life, and relationships. Really important. Repetition matters more than intensity. Just start doing these things. You don't have to do them hard. You don't have to do them for long. If you forget, that's okay. But we want to keep bringing safety into our system, into our daily life, kind of like brushing our teeth. Can't just brush your teeth once for an hour, and that's good for the week, right? We brush our teeth for 3 minutes twice a day, and we repeat that every day. The goal is to shift a way of being, not doing. So just coming back to that idea again. Okay. Whew. So let's all take a breath. That was a lot of information. Hopefully you were able to take some of that in. Even if you took a little bit of that in, that's wonderful. If not, you can always go back and re-listen, slow this presentation down or speed it up, whatever works for you. But I wanted to make sure you had all of the information before we start moving into some of these techniques. So what I'd like to invite you to do right now is we're going to just kind of lean into orientation. So like just take a moment, take a nice deep breath. Whew. I'm going to take a sip of water. You might want to too if you've got water around you or something else because I am interocepting that I am thirsty. Hmm. Okay. So just let your eyes slowly scan the room. So we've done this 2 times already. This is our third time doing it. And this is a technique called orienting. And what I'd like to invite you to do is also turn your head from left to right, up and down, just looking around the room, allowing your nervous system to take in all of the information. And just name to yourself where you are right now. I'm at home recording this video. And just notice something neutral or pleasant. And once you find that neutral or pleasant thing, just maybe pause there. Just allow your system to take it in. And just notice what that's like. I'm looking at a picture over here to my left. There's some cool colors in it, and I just noticed a sigh. So a sigh like that, that's a sign that you're shifting into a more parasympathetic, safer state. That's the nervous system saying like, oh, I can relax. It's kind of like if those of you who are dog owners, if you've ever had your dog like jump up on the couch and lay down and just be like, ah, right? That's a like, oh, I'm safe here. I can relax. That's what you're looking for to naturally happen in your system as you do this practice. So when you're ready, just coming back to the screen, of course, this is something you can return to. And I'm just going to ask you to just take a moment to feel your feet on the floor. So assuming that you're sitting in a chair, if you're not, maybe move to a position where you can feel your feet on the floor. And then just notice that support. And now also bringing your awareness to all the places where your body comes in contact with the chair beneath you and behind you. And again, just allowing your nervous system to take that in. Maybe even softening into that support a little bit more, noticing what it's like for your weight to be held. And maybe you notice you take a deep breath or a sigh. Again, maybe you're even yawning. These are all signs that your nervous system's like, okay, I can stand down even just for a moment. Just for a moment. And now it's just shifting to rhythm, noticing your breath. And we're not going to try to change your breath. We're not going to try to fix it. We just want you to notice your natural breath, feeling any rhythm that's happening in your body. And just notice as you tune into your breath, the quality. Is it deep? Is it shallow? Is it fast? Is it slow? No changing or fixing. However, you might notice that as you pay attention to it, it naturally softens, deepens, slows, or not. We're just being curious about it. And I'm actually feeling a little yawn coming on. Oh, okay. So now just leaning into choice and permission, you can stop or shift at any time. There's no right way to feel right now. You could keep going. You can stand up, you can sit down, you can walk around, you can rock back and forth, which I am naturally doing because I do that sometimes. The pace in which you go matters. Urgency creates hypervigilance, it creates tension. Slow it down. Support your nervous system. Give it choice, give it permission. So again, these small signals of safety that we just went through, repeated often change the system. So orienting, grounding, paying attention to your breath, these are things that you can do anywhere, anytime. And you don't have to sit down and meditate for hours or do yoga for hours, which again are not bad things. But if you're doing them with a sense of urgency or a sense of like, I have to, or a sense of like, this is the thing that's going to heal me, your nervous system is just getting the message that you're still under threat. And so these small little signals, these are the things that matter. But again, it's like brushing your teeth. You have to do them consistently over time, often. So just to notice for a moment, just let's pause here. Is there anything right now that feels even 1% safer or more neutral than before? And if so, just stay with it for a moment. Maybe you notice someplace in your body that feels neutral or pleasant that you didn't before. Maybe a symptom, pain or otherwise, that was really loud before, maybe the volume's been turned down a little bit. Maybe you're noticing how it feels to be in your chair. And if not, that's okay too. It's the practice of gentle curiosity that matters here. One of the really important things as you go through this is that we really need to practice being outcome independent, meaning the work here is about the practice and not about the outcome of the practice, right? So when we start bringing safety into our system, it's the practice of doing these things, of bringing safety into our system without being attached to the outcome. Because as soon as we start being attached to the outcome, boom, we're right back in that grasping again. So it's this idea of, I don't know if you all have like followed or aware of like these like, like Facebook, Instagram, like I do not care. Like I do not care that I am. So I do not care if my symptoms change, but I do care about how I perceive my symptoms. That's the shift. So just very briefly, one of the most effective ways of working with these neuroplastic symptoms and bringing safety into our system is something called somatic tracking. Some of you may already be aware of it. And there's three components to somatic tracking. So there's a mindfulness piece. There is safety reappraisal, which has to do with, like, again, that idea of bringing safety into our system. And then this third aspect of inducing a positive emotional state. So I want to be really clear about this. This isn't about toxic positivity or pushing down or away any what we might perceive as negative thoughts or negative feelings, because we want to have room for everything. But when we are working specifically with our symptoms, what we are trying to do is retrain the brain to not see these symptoms as a threat or not interpret them as a threat. So we start with just tracking them. So we're going to do like a quick 3-minute somatic tracking exercise here, and I'm going to put some information in the notes that will give you a link to a little bit of a longer somatic tracking exercise, but just to kind of give you a taste of it. And what we're going to end with in terms of inducing a positive emotional state is a heart math technique, which I'll tell you a little bit more about afterwards, but just so that you have context. You know what we're doing. And then also, of course, you have choice. You can participate in this or not. That's totally up to you. Participate in certain aspects of it or all of them. Totally up to you. So we just start with, if it feels okay, you can close your eyes or gently rest them on the floor in front of you, but we want to turn our attention inward. And we want to find a sensation in our body that maybe is showing up in terms of intensity at around a 3 or a 4. That's really important too. If you have a symptom or pain that's like a 6 or above, you do not want to do somatic tracking with it. That's a whole other conversation. But when it's that intense, somatic tracking has the potential to just re-traumatize you. So we're looking for symptoms that are like 3, 4, 5-ish. And it just might be a sensation in your, in your back, in your belly, in your head. It could be anxiety. It could be anything. And if you don't have a symptom that's at a 3 or a 4, then just, see if you can find a sensation in your body somewhere. And we just want to bring your internal awareness to the sensation. Maybe just kind of standing on the edges of it, as if you were kind of floating in a body of water, maybe a lake or the ocean, and you're snorkeling and you're watching a school of fish go by. We're not trying to change it. We're not trying to analyze it. We're not trying to fix it. We're just like watching it. We're just being really curious. And we really want to like take in the quality of this sensation. Like, is it a pulsing or a stinging? Does it have a color or shape? Does it have a temperature? Is it hot, cold, or tepid? And just notice as you keep paying attention to this sensation, just notice what happens. Does it move? Does it shift? Does it get more intense? Does it get less intense? Do certain thoughts come up? Certain memories? And if so, that's okay. Try to bring your awareness back to the sensation, but also notice. We don't want to get attached to these thoughts or memories or images, but sometimes that happens. And what I'd like to invite you to do here as you stay with this sensation is just remind yourself, like, this is just a sensation. There is nothing wrong with me. I am safe here and now. It's just a sensation. It's just my brain and nervous system's way of trying to communicate with me. All it is. Maybe even taking a nice deep breath and breathing into the sensation. And now what I'd like to invite you to do as you kind of stay with the sensation is just start breathing in and out of it. And then bringing your awareness to your heart center and just breathing in and out of your heart center, nice and slow and deep. And now intentionally initiating what we would call an uplifting emotion. So gratitude, joy, appreciation. And you can do that by bringing in a memory or a person or a place or for me, I like to use a sensation like the sun on my face. And this is like it's simple, but it's not easy. So if you're struggling with it, that's totally okay too. I'm going to put in the notes some links to heart math exercises as well so you can practice. But the idea is we want to bring the vibration of that emotional state into your heart center and just allow that to kind of fill your heart center, this uplifting vibration. And now bringing your awareness back to that sensation, the original one that we started with, and just noticing. Has anything changed? And it may not, and that's okay too. It may have gotten more intense. That's okay too. Again, we're not outcome dependent here. This is just about the process. But what we're doing is we are, we talked about that neuroplasticity, right? The brain and the nervous system learned this particular pattern and we're trying to help it unlearn it, right? We're creating new neural networks where we're focusing on the sensation, but instead of being afraid of it or making meaning out of it or going down some rabbit hole, we're staying with it, we're being curious, we're reminding ourselves that we're safe and that we're okay. And we are bringing in gratitude, like the vibration of gratitude and appreciation along with it. And we're just noticing what happens when we do that. And so just taking another breath and coming back. As we continue to retrain your brain for safety, this finding or generating a neutral or positive feeling in your body and staying with it is really important. So our brain will automatically go back to those old patterns. It's like a boomerang, right? Boom, boom, boom. Nervous system likes familiarity. It will default there. That's okay. When we keep practicing, we start to change the pathway a little bit. And that's really what we're looking for. So I love the heart math quick coherence technique for this. This is something, again, that you can do anywhere, anytime. It's not like a big deal of having to find 20 minutes to meditate, but it's what we did at the end of that somatic tracking, where you begin to breathe in and out of your heart center, and then you generate that uplifting emotion. While you continue to breathe, you just allow that emotion to fill your heart center. And you could do it for a minute, you could do it for 2 minutes, you could do it for 20 minutes if you want. The idea is that it just consistency and repetition. And that's more important. 1 minute, 2, 3 times a day is going to be better than 20 minutes one time a week. We're really trying to retrain your system to be familiar with safety opposed to threat. Okay, so just some key takeaways. Pain and symptoms are protective signals. They're not proof of damage all the time. Your nervous system is trying to keep you safe, and it uses pain and uncomfortable symptoms as a way of trying to tell you that there is a threat. The problem is that sometimes that threat is real, sometimes it's not. A regulated nervous system can respond to a threat and then stand down. So it's safety that allows the body to return to connection, presence, and ease. When we are stuck in those protective states, we never get back to connection, presence, and ease. Safety is what helps the nervous system do that. Neuroplastic pain occurs when the system stays in protection. The signal continues even after the danger has passed. Safety is the intervention. So when the nervous system detects safety, the brain no longer needs pain as protection. It's like, oh, all right, we're good. I don't need to like send the alarm. And our system can relearn. So with these gentle repeated safety cues, the nervous system can shift out of threat and back into regulation. Thank you so much for listening. If you made it through the whole presentation, I know it was a lot of information. Tried to make it gentle on the nervous system, but there is so much to share about this. And I just want to try and get as much information as possible to folks that will be helpful on your healing journey. Please reach out with any questions, and just sending you all a lot of love and light on your journey. Okay, thank you.